happening?
I know. Welcome, everybody, to a really special episode of Future of Beauty Unfiltered podcast. Today, we are back again, but with some extra special and just about willing guests talking all things menopause. So, on the 29th, just a slight caveat, guys, for anyone that's listening. If you hear anyone groaning or looking uncomfortable, it's actually because our very own CEO, Chris Bullock, is currently sat in... What's the actual name for this, Tina?
The MENopause.
The MENopause.
Yeah.
We've just turned it on. So, today we have some really amazing people that have been on the podcast before, but we thought it's such an interesting and important topic that we needed to come back and do another one. So we have our very own Chris Bullock, as I've mentioned, CEO of the Pull Agency, and we are joined by Dean Corney, our very own MD as well. Welcome, Dean, to your first podcast.
Have I got a wave as well? The camera's on.
Yeah, you can wave. As long as you're talking the mic, it doesn't really matter.
Is that near enough?
Just about. I'd move it a little bit.
I'll move it a bit nearer. There we go.
Just don't get too close, because
you're hot enough.
I'm heating up.
Yes, Tina Backhouse is also back again from Theramex, bringing an amazing vest with us today, created by Over the Bloody Moon and also funded in partnership with Theramex. So, why are we here? So on the 29th of June, 2022, male MPs began trying on vests that simulated the feeling of a hot flush. You having any of those yet, Chris?
Steady flush.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which some women experience at both perimenopausal and menopausal stages. Now, the vest was developed, as I've mentioned, by Over the Bloody Moon, a group that provides advice on menopause to companies and individuals, and it was funded by London-based pharmaceutical company Theramex. The event was organised in Parliament by Labour MP Carolyn Harris, with former Tory leader Ian Duncan Smith and Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting amongst those taking part. Now, Carolyn Harris, who has spoken openly about her own experience of menopause, said that it was easy to underestimate the intensity of hot flushes and the impact they have on your daily life, and hoped that the vests would actually help male colleagues empathise with this experience. Now, of course, after Tina suggested that we give this a try, we couldn't possibly have said no at the opportunity to do just that. So
We could, but you didn't let us.
No, I absolutely didn't. Why? Thank God it's muggy today as well. Shame the heat wave's over.
When I heard the forecast this morning, my heart sunk.
We did want to put it off till November, but we said no.
No, absolutely. So the Pull Agency, for anyone that's listening that doesn't know, it was born over 14 years ago now, and it brought two specialist agencies together, brand and digital. Now, as a business, we specialise in health and beauty. However, at the heart of that are three male owners. Why is this relevant, you say? Well, menopause at the workplace, it hardly ever gets discussed. And this is one of the things that we're looking to hopefully change. And at Pull, we're really lucky. So 48% of Pull's staff being female of all ages, we thought it was a great way to partner with Theramex for a special podcast and make our directors more aware of what some of their women may go through when experiencing the menopause. So before you started working with Theramex, Chris, because I think this is a really interesting question, I know Tina's going to have viewpoints as well. So we started working with you guys, beginning of this year, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I think the thing I really loved about Theramex and your ethos within the UK was it was the power of choice. And we've spoke about this before, and it's giving women the ability to choose. So while Theramex focuses on HRT, not everyone can take that. And so you wanted to ensure that there were other options out there, whether we call them natural alternatives, whatever that may be, it's that choice. Now, Chris, you worked with them kind of on the brand building initially to kind of find that clear voice at moving forward in the market. And you've always been, I think, a bit of a feminist in that sense, you know. I think
some may say.
Some may
Others
say.
may not.
But I think actually going through this process, it made you even more so when it came to understanding the menopause and what people go through. And I think what's really interesting about seeing you in the vest right now, it kind of looks like something you'd be wearing on your bike. I don't know, it's a bit of cycling.
It's like a gilet.
I'm really thinking I'd love to borrow this for
the winter.
riding my motorbike in January. I'm not sure about now. Yeah.
It's that 24-hour vest we were talking about, Tina.
Exactly. Yeah.
So as you're wearing this vest right now, what are you feeling?
Well, I keep on thinking, I'm getting used to this. And then I realise that it's getting hot again, and I think that must be because Tina's doing something devious with
No,
my
I'm
control.
not. I'm honestly not.
So
It's just
It's on
natural.
waves.
maybe it's me. Okay, it does that. Yeah,
it's
yeah,
a flush,
yeah.
effectively.
So
Yeah, it's not
it
an
goes
flush.
from being bearable to thinking this is not very comfortable, basically. Yeah, yeah.
So, I guess, Tina, can you explain a bit about what the vest actually does?
Yeah, so the vest, it's a quite simple technology. It's just battery operated, and it basically just simulates, not stimulates. It
I'm getting
simulates.
stimulated.
Are you feeling stimulated? It simulates.
Why did we put
a
you two
hot
next
flush.
to each other?
So you will feel it's on a 3-minute cycle that it comes in waves, and it's at different parts of your body as well. And that's because our natural, some people feel it more in the neck, some people feel it more on their back, and that's because you have estrogen receptors all over your body that will respond to heat in that way. So you can't really tell. So everyone experiences the vest in a slightly different way. And of course, we know that, menopause is not just about hot flushes. And, the point of this is that there's 48 signs of menopause, but this is about really helping people understand and getting the conversation going, and to talk about it in the workplace as well, and the things that could help people if they were feeling these symptoms of menopause.
And I think we've spoke about that a few times where there's this expectation that it is just you're getting a bit hot, you're going a bit gaga, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
When my mum went through that process, she actually never really spoke to us about it. Your wives and partners might have gone through this or going through this. As men that have partners in this space, have you noticed any challenge? Is that something you openly have a conversation about when it comes to the menopause?
Yeah, so I think I would say even before we met Tina, Theramex, I was mystified by what I saw as a kind of last taboo. This has really brought it to life for me. So yeah, having a partner experiencing some of it. I mean, I wouldn't say experienced it firsthand. I guess it's secondhand. And we did, fortunately, I think, because I think it helps a lot. We did talk about it to some extent, not a huge extent. But I think one of the things we did say was this is odd. Why is it that every other life stage is something that's been normalized? And, for instance, for me, teenagehood is a good example. For most teenagers, being a teenager has its, let's say, ups and downs, to say at least. But that's kind of normalized by society. People, I think, recognize and talk openly about the challenges of being a teen or having a teen in the house. And I thought, isn't it weird, really? We can talk about almost everything. That seems to be the last taboo. Why is it that most men know really next to nothing? Next to nothing. Nobody has explained anything. And even then, as we started doing research and talking to Theramex, that I was somewhat shocked with that, how many women that's true for as well.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things that I think when we first started talking to you guys, you went out and Theramex tried to get some of those answers around the education and understanding. We believe as a business, we talk about this all the time, right? Go and ask your customer. Go and ask the person you're trying to talk to and find out what they think and how they feel, because that's what's going to make you more authentic.
But do you think there's is it a British thing? Is it British stiff upper lip, as you get on with it? I mean, again, I'm not sure if we've done research outside the UK, but again, I know my wife had menopause and she didn't really complain about it. She mentioned it and we sort of again spoke about it, and I didn't really think much of it. And I suppose, again, because I didn't realise how impactful it was in her life. I mean, I just didn't, I just walk a mile in someone else's shoes, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is why this is interesting, because even if it's a small insight, the vest, into what it's like, and that's just a tiny part of it, right? But I wonder if it is that English thing, and it's like, their mums, they're English, just get on with it. We're just going to get on with it, right? And actually, it's just about, it's like all things, it's awareness, right? And having been made aware, we're now more, we've got more empathy towards it.
Absolutely. And, there's definitely a cultural thing, isn't it, about, and we're trying to change culture, and it's the evolution, not the revolution, which is what I'm always saying. And, but I think it's a culture that exists in all countries. And all cultures. I think it's historical. If you think, not that long ago, 100 years ago, women were being put in asylums at this age. You know, there is, and we know, you know, Carolyn Harris talks very openly about this, about, you know, she remembers her mum and her aunties talking about it in hushed voices, and her being sent out of the room because it was nothing to do with her. And she said, and I was 31. You know, so that's where we are in terms of people not being that open about it, and it being women's problems, and we don't talk about it openly. And though we don't lock people in asylums anymore, you know, as I've said before, you know, there are the majority of women in prison are this age group, you know, and we know that it has a big effect on women trying to self-medicate with drink and drugs and, you know, gambling and all these other things. And these are all related. So breaking these taboos and people just having that discussion is how we're going to change that. So, you know, our sons will, you know, obviously be able to hopefully be in a better position to understand.
Yeah, and it's interesting, again, going back to the point about how, again, this is just the heat thing is a small part of it. Now, how many times did I hear my wife, you know, mentioning the menopause, or like, you know, something would happen, she'd blame it, and I was like, I almost didn't believe her in the end. You know, it's like, you can't keep blaming, you know, like
everything.
Well, like, but you know, in hindsight, and now talking to her, having talked to her last night about this, she wasn't lying. There was so much impact on her life in so many ways, and when she kept saying it, oh, you know, or she was not having a good day, it was that. And I suppose I didn't argue against it, but I didn't necessarily understand how impactful it was.
I think it's because you don't have control. I think that's a part of the challenge, is you spend your life trying to control so many things, your health, you know, how fit and active you are. I think, you know, we were talking about this morning before we started this podcast, Tina, around exercise. Like, personal trainers aren't necessarily educated enough across the board on how to help women train. You know, there are different times of the month where as women we produce more testosterone or less, and that actually enhances our ability to build muscle within our own bodies. And people don't have enough awareness, let alone women, but the people that are training from a nutritional point of view, there are so many other factors that come into play when it comes to just the female reproductive cycle, let alone then when you enter the kind of peri and menopausal stages and postmenopausal stages of your life, of how do you need to adapt your diet to support that? You know, what else do you need to do to help enhance that quality of life? And I think that's what's been really interesting when we started actually working with you guys, is it opened up a whole new way of thinking, I think, really, and particularly for you guys as owners of the business. I found it amazing to watch, because particularly you, Chris, you know, we joked you were going to start taking the supplements at one point, you know. And I think it's, how can we do better? So we did a piece of, Theramex conducted a piece of research where they went and asked the questions. And one of the findings from the research was that 48% of men that were asked wanted some or a lot of information and support about the menopause. Why do you think that's quite a high percentage of people that are actively wanting information?
I'm okay for now.
Turn it up.
It's the waves that are disconcerting. Actually, it makes me think of what Hannah was saying about control. And that is doing a good job, I think, in the sense that, you know, when you talk to people who experience hot flushes, it's that hitting you out of the blue at the wrong moment that seems to be the most annoying. You're sitting with somebody in a restaurant, whatever, all of a sudden, and you're thinking there's no change in temperature. They're going, you know, I'm hot right now.
You've got a nice shiny forehead.
And I think this is doing a pretty good job of that. Yeah. But sorry, I interrupted. You were asking.
Yeah, but you know what? This is probably the most unorganised podcast that we've ever done, but I love it because it kind of proves the point, right? When you're going through all of this, it's hard to concentrate, or you feel like someone's talking about something and you're kind of getting really distracted because there's this driving feeling and sensation going on, and you're like, hold on a minute, I'm trying to half, and that's part of the challenge, isn't it? It's that taking over everyday life.
Yeah, but you were asking about need for information or desire for information. I think it shows that there's an underlying need and enthusiasm, almost, should I say, from men to know something, because something is better than nothing. And I think the qual research that was done by Theramex. I thought it was really interesting, with men who were saying, I really want to help, but everything I do seems to be wrong. Okay. And I think that might be a key driver behind why people are looking for information. And that's why I think we felt there was a big opportunity for Femoral to normalize this subject, so that it doesn't necessarily just need to be, pushed out. You can have an education program for men, whatever, because that stuff doesn't always work. But just create a context where it's something that people naturally talk about. I mean, why wouldn't you? If you're sitting next to somebody who's feeling hot all of a sudden, you shouldn't be surprised, and you should be able to talk about it. And by the way, one other thing occurred to me about, Dean was saying about the stiff upper lip. I think that, and Tina, you touched on it, I think there's a cultural background which impacts how menopause is treated, as it were, in every different culture.
Yeah.
And therefore that's something that's got to be considered in terms of, like normalising the conversation, because that probably needs to be done in different ways in different places. I mean, I think what we know is in the UK that the debate is quite advanced. We live in, fortunately, it seems, at least a reasonably sophisticated society in which conversations can take place. However, that doesn't mean to say there isn't an element of this stiff upper. That's our cultural background, and it's not like the Brits to talk about things. So, let's just talk about it, right?
Exactly. Actually, one of the biggest successes I had recently was one of my friends, who's a big burly crane driver, rang me up and said, "Oh, I've been speaking to so-and-so who I work with, and he was talking about his missus and the menopause." And I said, "Oh, I know a bit about this because my friend Tina," and I just thought, that's brilliant.
There you go.
If that's all I ever achieve, the fact that you are the most unlikely person and imagining these two guys talking about it on site, and him saying, "Actually, I do know a bit about this because of my friend."
Perfect. It's changing the conversation, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, why do we think it is such a taboo? Why? What's the why isn't it more open? Why aren't we having it? Because I don't feel like, again, now we're talking about it, I don't feel like it's a, again, all through my wife sort of talking about it, we didn't talk about it, but I didn't feel it was taboo. She didn't really want to talk about it, I suppose. But I don't know.
I think when, to take a kind of anthropological point of view about it, I think you'll find, I mentioned that different societies think in different ways. However, one thing you'll find in common is that there's a form of taboo in almost every society. So that must have deep roots. It'd be interesting to understand why. I'm not an anthropologist, so I can't say why. Yeah. But it's a common thing. It just manifests itself differently in different cultures.
Does this not go back to, we're going to go down a rabbit hole here, but I'm quite interested to see I know what Tina's views are going to be on it, but I'm going to do it anyway. We speak about this a lot in beauty in particular, where there's this really annoying thing about aging in women. So a man gets grey hairs and he's a silver fox, George Clooney, and then a woman gets grey hairs and she's let herself go. There's this constant kind of, and that's obviously not everyone's views, by the way, I'm very much generalising, but I think there's still this, it's this anti-aging, all these products that are out there, it's anti-aging, it's anti-wrinkle, whereas when you're younger, it's very much pro-you, go you, like be the best you, and then you reach a certain stage in life, and it's like, stop, don't go any further. Why is that? Because I think that's what we're trying to fight against. And the menopause kind of matters, positivity, that's part of that dialogue.
And I do think it's interesting, and I do think it comes from the fact that, deep rooted, not in anyone's consciousness, but deep rooted, what does menopause signify? And menopause signifies the end of your fertility as a woman, and for, hundreds and hundreds of years, women's worth has been, validated by their ability to reproduce.
I think this is why it's common in all societies. But again, to go back to my teenager analogy, I mean, the thing is, that's the beginning of reproductive life.
Yes.
Maybe one of the issues is that, with men, the end of reproductive life is not so clear. And I think, so hence the silver fox thing may still be
Yeah.
reproducing. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Whereas,
Rooney.
and I think it's the root of this. But the great thing I think is that in a way it shouldn't matter, however deep and far back the roots of this prejudice go. Effectively, society's made a good fist of dealing with other prejudices.
Absolutely,
I think
yeah.
it's about time it dealt with this one. But that's why I see it as the last taboo as well.
Yeah.
Because we in terms of gender orientation, racial orientation, all these things now are well advanced, I think, compared to the menopause.
Yeah, they're definitely not fixed, are they? There's still a long way to go. But I think as far as which horse got out the gate first, so to speak, and on the journey
This
of,
is kind of the
having
last
the dialogue,
one,
this is definitely
yeah.
the slower one out the gate.
But I think, going back to what you said, I think the difference now between sort of when you said, as you get to a certain age, it's like, you just don't go. I think what's changed in the last, 20 years, 10 years, 20 years, it is do go now. I don't think people do generally slow up. I mean, in fact, some of the most energetic, active people I know, and maybe that's why it's part of it, it's like, we're not going to let these things stop us, right? Whatever they might be. And that's definitely, I mean, culturally now, some of the most active people I know are the older people I know. In fact, rather than the younger people. In fact, it's almost turned around. Like I know, to an extent, I think that is the case, and therefore nothing's going to stop us now. So it's sort of the motto I feel of people over 40. Like whereas before, I think there was a feeling, there's an inevitability that's gone. I don't think.
I agree.
But I think that's where some of the marketing communities, and we spoke about this in other podcasts, where we're making a bit of a mistake and we're kind of generalising. And actually, like you've just said, there are so many instances where you can say that people in their later stages of life are actually, one, have it more together than they ever had before because they're now not time poor because they're not running around after tiny little kids and trying to build a career, and they have more expendable income. They're at a stage where they can invest in themselves more, but a lot of brands don't talk to those people, particularly women. For us, this is a really powerful topic. They are essentially Gen X, whatever you want to label these women at these stages of their life. They are already and very much the forgotten consumer in that space. And I think this is where menopause, the discussion that's going around it, really has, I think, a lot of power in making that positive change.
I do agree with that, and I do think that the group of women that are leading this, and there's so many from different cultures and different backgrounds and different parts of of business. And one of the overwhelming things that I do think, which is relevant to what we're talking about, is my daughter, who's 12, her experience is that women at this age can be immensely powerful and in the media and on television and doing all these things that we are doing. So she's never going to think that at 50, my life is over. So, and that's a positive thing, I think. So, you are being role models for the generations that will come after you as well.
Totally. I've got a 5-year-old and I'm raising him to be a feminist. So,
well, psychology would tell you that the most important thing you can do for feminism is to raise your boys as feminists.
Absolutely.
I
think as well, while men's views are really important, let's not forget this is actually about what women go through. I think a huge part of why in the research as well, less than a quarter of women said that they felt fairly or very well supported while going through the menopause from family members, friends, doctors. There are so many different streams of support that I think are needed. But off the back of that, what I found really interesting was that they're still trying to do it on their own. So they're more likely to seek advice or, insight as to what they're going through themselves rather than going to a professional. So Google becomes their friend. There's a lot of, I've got this symptom and that symptom. So there's a lot of self-diagnosis going on rather than going to speak to medical professionals as the starting point. Why do you think that is? Because I know you've got lots of viewpoints, Tina.
I do think that's the case. The first thing I would say about that is I think where we are with the digital age has been a friend to women at this stage because there is so much information out there now, and there's some incredible apps. I've mentioned it before. Louise Newson's Balance app I think is incredible and gives free information to people. All that kind of easily available digital stuff when women are mostly feeling the symptoms of menopause when they get up at 2:00 in the morning and they can't sleep, and they're on the internet looking for this and trying to get some information before they go and see their doctor. And I think it's really hard now. I mean, we were, post-pandemic times Brexit equals what for the NHS. And what I would say, having worked in this business for 30 years, the NHS is, has always lumbered along in some kind of way. But I would say at the moment it is completely broken. And that is going to be a challenge in terms of accessing healthcare for women going forward. And, my belief is that women shouldn't have to see a menopause specialist, GP, to talk about their menopause. They should be able to see their family GP, as when you're pregnant or taking contraception, you don't go and see a contraception specialist GP, you go and see your family GP who understands. And that's exactly how it should be for women. We need to normalise this is a part of life. We need to normalise it. But I think digital has accelerated this conversation because there's so much information out there now, and it's empowering to women. In the majority of times, it's empowering to women.
Absolutely. Chris, how you feeling over there in that little vest of yours?
Warm.
Very quiet.
Yeah, you have gone very quiet. Come on, talk to me. Tell
There's
me
no
how you're
steam,
feeling.
and it's not smoking.
not
Unlike
smoking.
what I heard it had done previously,
You don't want to
and it does
make
look
it
suspiciously like a suicide vest.
Yeah, so one of the most common signs, whatever we want to call it, that people are aware of are hot flushes. So you've been sat here for the last 20 minutes while we've been talking, experiencing that. Share for the listeners how that's feeling.
Well, I'd hate it. I mean, I think that the shocking thing is, and it must be this very clever kind of cycle, but that sense of you're just feeling okay, and then you get overwhelmed. So I think it must be very realistic in that sense, and that's really quite irritating.
Is it? And how are you finding your ability to listen and concentrate?
That's okay. I mean, I'm rising above it. But again, just like all those women have to do,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
You've got to concentrate. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, let's get you out of that. Take a quick break. Let's get a jingle on, and we'll get Dean in the hot seat next. This time, we've got our very own Dean Corney in the vest. Chris, you took the vest off. Should we talk about that experience for a moment?
Well, taking it off.
Yeah.
It was quite a relief. Yeah.
Yeah. It was quite warm, wasn't it?
I was sweaty in places, I have to admit. Yeah.
Yeah, we had to run out the building a little bit. But do you know what?
Yeah, you all ran out the building.
I think everyone was happy to put the fan back on for a minute. It's definitely warmer than I thought it was going to be, which I'm thrilled about. Dean, it's just been on. How's it feeling? Has anything happened yet?
Yeah, it's quite. I mean, I know there's only replication, but it's quite intense, the heat. I don't know what I expected. I suppose like a slowly building, like a hot water bottle. But no, it's quite intense. It's not burning me, but yeah, it's quite hot. As in the bits that are hot are hot.
Yeah, I think we were slightly disappointed because you love the heat, so I think you're going to find this quite soothing, aren't you?
I don't know. I like the heat of the sun. Being just hot is different, I think.
Yeah.
So we were talking earlier about the signs, kind of men's awareness, women wanting to kind of self-diagnose a little bit, should I say, looking to kind of the digital world for support and kind of not necessarily having access to all of that knowledge easily. You always have to go kind of down the specialist route. One of the things that we found really interesting was there was a statistic in a piece of research that we came across saying 66% of women feel at least some impact on the quality of their work life when they are perimenopausal, menopausal or post. Many feel unsupported by male bosses or younger staff. Now, the government's trying to address some of this stigma, obviously, as we've been talking about so far today, but one of the initiatives is to encourage employers to put codes of conduct in place. As leaders of a company, now, Paul are, about 30 plus staff at the moment. As leaders of a company with 48% of women, do you think adjustments like this should be made? And if so, what do you think, as male owners, can be done to support that? I think apart from having the open dialogues like we are already.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about empathy for everything, right? As in, I think as a business, we listen. We want people to talk about the challenges because they're multiple, right? And this is just another challenge. Yeah. So therefore, it's about not being afraid to have the discussions, which I think the best thing about Paul, I think, is that we do have discussions. You know, people don't always agree, but we're quite open to talking about stuff. I hope it's somewhere where people feel they can talk about anything, really. I hope, within reason, right? And therefore, if we can talk about things, we can work through those challenges as they come. I mean, I think, do we need some sort of, at this moment, do we need a menopause, one page? I don't know. I would hope that those people that were experiencing it would know that there is support in the business, and that within reason, they could talk to people, and we would manage whatever that might look like. Whether you're, whether you're a mother or you've got issues with your mental health. Again, I think it's nice to have processes and things, but actually, if you just got a culture that is understanding that life can be shit, life can be tough, life's different for everyone, then that's so it's cultural, I think, mainly. I think, you can have lots of different procedures and processes as well. And so I followed the guidance, but actually, people and process, right? And the people part is more important, I think, than perhaps the process part, but you should have both.
And I think, Chris, so we've been talking about diversity a lot in our business lately. And I think one of the things that Catherine, our head of brand strategy, was kind of talking about diversity can be cut in so many different ways. And actually, while there are some areas where Pull are pushing to do better and kind of be more diverse, there are lots of other ways in which we are. So we're diverse from, I'd say, an age point of view. The fact that we have 48% women in the business. We've got a pretty good mix of females in the leadership team as well. So there's a lot of diversity in that space. I think as Paul grows and we kind of do get a bigger range of people, particularly to support the younger people coming into the business, or even, so me, I'm 34. At some point, it's going to come for me in the next few years, or if I'm lucky, the next 10. But who knows, right?
Talk to us about it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like, what are your thoughts on, from your point of view? You've been at P&G, you've been at all these kind of massive brands. What would you like to see kind of other businesses and brands doing to support that dialogue?
Well, first of all, I think to pick up from where Dean left off, as it were, I think, I would hope that the senior management team, the directors, the owners, were empathetic enough, as he says, to be able to take this within our stride. Having said that, I think as you grow, and when you look at larger organizations, they need to act, I think. And I think there's no question about it. In the same way that I feel that, menopause is the last taboo, I think it's the last prejudice in the workplace, as it were. Or not to say the other ones don't exist, but I think there's a massive problem in attitudes towards menopausal women in the workplace. And I think that absolutely has to be addressed. So I think large organizations, maybe small ones, certainly should have a policy. They should discuss it, debate it. And, when they're recruiting, I'm sure there are many, many businesses that are prejudicial in their recruiting and see menopausal women as, difficult. And I think that's something that has to be confronted head on and dealt with. And I think also, we think about the other challenges people have balancing their working life. Young children is an obvious example, like Dean has alluded to. Well, this should be part of that as well. It should be, what allowances do you need to make? I feel that the best employers make a lot of allowances, okay, but they get a lot in return. That's a kind of underlying spirit, I think, that we have in the agency here. I hope that the people who work here feel like that. I think they do, based on the surveys. But I think that's an essential component. Unfortunately, I think in bigger organizations, you have to legislate for that. Yeah. You can't just expect it.
Oh, no, I would agree. As someone that works for Pull, it was one of the reasons I came here. I think being a mum, doing a lot of it on my own with a small young child, what I wanted from my life is I was never that person, and there's nothing wrong with this choice, to go, I'm going to have a kid and then that's me career-wise done. It was always, I'm going to have this career, I'm going to be a badass working mum, and I never really wanted to compromise. And I think what I loved about Pull was it supported me to be the best mum I can be, to the best of my ability with the time I've got, but also to be passionate and push the career. Tina, what do you think? Because obviously you've seen this from so many different perspectives. You know, you've been in this world for a really long time. What do you think organisations, big or small, could do better?
I think, I mean, I really do agree with Chris and Dean here about, you know, it's about culture. And I think, you know, what we're seeing some big companies like big banks and things put policies in place, and through menopause in the workplace and the menopause mandate, and all of those things I think are necessary and important. I mean, at Theramex, we tend not to be that formal, but we tend not to be that formal about anything. But we also have a culture where we can pretty much say, you know, my CEO, you know, we've had discussions before when I've said, look, I just can't do this right now because I'm overwhelmed, and, you know, my menopause symptoms were out of control and I need help, you know, and I was quite comfortable to have that conversation. So I think, you know, that's the culture that we want to be in, where people, and I agree with you 100%, you know, you go out and you do what you can to support people and you get it back, you know, 100-fold every single time, because you're invested in people's lives and helping people achieve. I think this idea around recruitment and, you know, looking at people's ages, I mean, I can honestly tell you, when I recruit people, it never comes into my mind how old they are. In fact, I was quite surprised the other day to find out one of our sales team was 60, and I never knew he was 60, and I never thought to ask, and it never really. Why would I need to know? I don't ever, in the same way, I don't think, oh, I'm not going to take people on in their early 30s because they might go and have a baby. I never think that stuff, because I'm always looking at, you know, people will do what they need to do, and this is part of your life cycle of working with people. So for me, I think it's just valuing what older women can bring. There's a lot of women who are involved in this menopause movement, I guess, who had very significant jobs and felt they were forced to leave those jobs, whether they were editors of newspapers, CFOs of banks, all these things. They had very big jobs and of huge amounts of experience, and they felt they had to leave their jobs, and that's the reality.
Is that because they were having periods where they couldn't do the work?
Yeah, well, they couldn't function.
And they couldn't talk to anyone about that.
I think that's it, yeah.
Yeah,
so
therefore,
they just felt they didn't have the support.
I think it's interesting, isn't it, again, with the whole, again, maybe the positives and negatives of the flexible working is there is I think people are working more flexibly now, so perhaps there are, you know, whereas, you know, because you're not being watched sometimes.
Yeah.
In an office environment, you know, you can feel like, I don't feel very well now. What do I do? I've got to keep going. Whereas if there are women at home now with menopause that are working, they're choosing to work. That, you know, they're not feeling well and they're not feeling guilty because no one's watched them. Then go and do something. I don't know how, you know, for whatever period. So perhaps it will help. Perhaps more flexible working will help some of those people, because it's not about talking about it. It's just having the opportunity to take some time out, not feeling like you're being watched, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think flexible working would help people. And, you know, if you're able to say, if you're in an environment where you can say, look, I'm going through this, can I work more flexibly? Can I come in a bit later because I haven't slept all night? Or, you know, there's days when, you know, I'm perimenopause, or I might be bleeding very heavily and not feel comfortable to leave the house. You know, we've got to be able to have those conversations, I think. So I think flexible working is a key part of any menopause policy moving forward.
I think it's culture as well, though, because, like, prime example, overshare here, sorry guys, but, like, I called Dean up one day and went, I'm not coming in, I've got the worst period pains ever, I feel like crap.
What do I say to that?
Dean just kind of went, bye, all right, see you later. Like, and that was kind of it. But I felt comfortable. While Dean was squirming in the conversation, I felt comfortable enough to actually tell the truth. You're
right. And this culture thing, I was in a call the other day with someone. They were talking about you pay into and pay out of the culture of a business. Right? And so effectively, you know, the culture is us saying we're giving stuff. We're giving from the bank of pull pays out, right? And the paying back in is the people going, do you know what? I didn't feel well this morning because I had feeling ill with the menopause, but I will do my hours because you're paying back into that, and that's the exchange. And it's never always quite balanced, but I think businesses where have that balanced respect for the business and the business respects the staff and the people is when it works really well. And this is why, again, for smaller businesses, it can be quite flexible in terms of how it works, because it's purely, you just get a feeling. And, and hopefully if you've got a strong business as well, people don't, if someone stands out by not having a fair exchange, it's quite obvious, right?
Yeah, I think as well. So I think there's opportunities for smaller businesses to actually show the bigger businesses how it should be done when it comes to the dialogue around not just menopause, mental health, whatever it may be, but menopause be a part of that grouping of additional things that are part of culture. That being said, I know that I've got a friend that works for British Airways. I know people that work at Google and all these other places. And you're starting to see more and more these bigger companies really elevating the dialogue to go to these older members of staff, sometimes too old, and say, we just want you to know that we acknowledge that there's a stage of life that's going to be complicated for you. And so we've put in place a person or a group or whatever it may be for additional support should you feel that's necessary. And I think that's harder for smaller companies sometimes because it's a scale thing, right? Lots of people wear multiple hats, but I think having that openness in the dialogue and kind of being able to, particularly with men, include them into that conversation. I think that's where working with you guys, I think we said the word period more on this podcast or when we've been working with Theramex than we ever have openly before. And I think now, at first, you could see everyone kind of wincing and going, oh my goodness, this is an uncomfortable conversation. But now no one really flinches at it. And I think that's been a really positive thing on the business in working with you guys.
I think that's absolutely true. I mean, I think that's why, we take, and it is a big responsibility. I do take my responsibility sometimes as an older woman role model quite seriously, and not just in the workplace, but generally. I mean, I can't even tell you the amount of Facebook messages I get from people I barely know, LinkedIn messages from people asking me to help them because they know I've got an interest in it. But also in the workplace, people that aren't in my own department, we talk about everything and we're very open with each other, perhaps too open sometimes, but we talk about everything. But there's other parts of the business where it's traditionally so supply is a really good where it's been traditionally quite male orientated. It's it's a part of the business. Pharmaceutical supply tends to be like that, manufacturing. So that those women feel that they can come to you and speak to you as well. So having this conversation with senior male colleagues is really important because it's about having that role model responsibility, I think.
But interestingly, I won't deny that I feel uncomfortable still. So when you say the word period, right? I mean, again, because I feel, I'm not used to be. We don't talk about it like that. I mean, although I've got a daughter and I've got a wife, right? So it's not. But even when they talk about it, I'll try and get out of the room, right?
Oh, my stepdad.
And why is
I
that?
used to do it on purpose.
Because my dad must have done it.
Period.
But I'm thinking,
but turn around
but then that's only from my. It must have been from my far, or it must just be. Yeah, I mean, because it's not that it's not that I. But that's really because again,
that's Chris's deep-rooted.
If you think,
social
so I just say, so therefore, it's like awareness, education, normalization, because it's the normalization piece where you have people like me who, for some reason, after 40 odd years, still find, what are you talking about? What are you talking about?
You're talking about it now. I mean, that's I think one other factor for us here in a relatively small organization is to have the opportunity to change the culture really quite fast. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. And it's one of the reasons I left the kind of big corporate world is because those things move so slowly. And you see dinosaurs in those businesses that you realize they're never going to change till they, retire or whatever. And I think the beauty of that is, I mentioned earlier, we don't have to legislate so much for cultural change. We can live it. And I think that, again, picking up on what Tina was saying about an open culture, I think that one of the things we've tried to work on, and I think have achieved to some extent, is an open culture. We have a lot of controversial discussions. When we did our Is Your Brand Too Woke discussion, that's a good example I talked about before, it was very clear that we had a kind of spectrum in the office of, woke youngsters to unwoke oldsters, as it were. But there was a lot of discussion, and what we found was that, in fact, our viewpoint wasn't really that different at all. It was polarized by things like social media. And I think this is similar because, and it's certainly helped working with Tina and Femoral and Theramex, is that we've opened up the discussion, and so therefore you talked about asking for leeway one morning or whatever. I think that's much more likely to happen right across the agency as a result of that kind of openness.
But interestingly, I think, again, makes me think, when we leave this room today, what are we going to do? I mean, literally, because we can be so agile.
I don't mean likes his lists.
Well, no, I just think, that we don't have to run out the room shouting menopause or whatever. But
I'm going to make you stand in the street and scream, period.
But what we should do in the next week is at least tell people we had this conversation. Yeah. Because if we don't because some people only in the office, right? Some people will not know this conversation happened today. If we had this really open conversation, just to let everyone know, it's something that we should talk about.
Yeah, and you have to act on it. I mean, one of the little delights I get at the moment is liking menopause related subjects on LinkedIn.
Yep, because it's one of our biggest likers.
It's like it tickles me that some of my old friends and colleagues will probably be somewhat embarrassed by that. I quite like that.
I feel really progressive.
Yeah.
Speaking of, Dean, swing the mic back around for me. How are you feeling in that vest? We've been there for a while now.
Yeah, do you know what?
We're getting a bit shiny.
It was more initially. I sort of got used to it now, but yeah, I am definitely warm.
The thing is, you like being warm, so it's really annoying because he's just sat there, like I said, 37-degree heat wave, and he's outside working in the garden.
It's being warm.
It's on the beach in Ibiza.
With a cocktail in hand.
I think the word I'd use is distracting, as Chris said. It's distracting because especially when it started, I wasn't really thinking about what we were doing. I was thinking about what it was doing and like what's going to happen next.
You were aware.
I was definitely aware, yeah.
And it's that distraction, I think, that women find difficult. So if you not the being hot. So if you are, a board member and you're standing up to give a big presentation and
suddenly get whacked.
You suddenly get whacked with a hot flash and you're worried about whether
and
you've
you're
got
going to be
sweat
nervous
marks.
anyway as well, potentially.
Exactly.
So it's that mixture of stress.
All those
out
things.
Out of control. Yeah.
Really are the things that make women not want to be in their profession.
But also layer that with the additional signs. So it's not, fatigue. Like there are so many other things.
That's why I keep thinking this is just one thing, right?
Yeah,
brain fog.
Now add kind of a bit
lack
of a fuzzy
sleep,
head. Like you haven't had
aching
a good night's
joints.
sleep. Yeah, your legs are hurting. So every time you I think it's the layering of them actually is even more combative. This is just one element of it, and I think that's where, as you rightly said, Dean, earlier with G, she didn't really talk too much about how disruptive it actually was on her ability to carry on. And let's all be honest, mums do most of the work when it comes to the kids. So it's kind of, to have that, women are busier than ever. The households are still being run predominantly, majority of the time, by the mums as well. Now layer in an additional stage of life where you've got 1,000,001 signs creeping in, having that impact. You can understand why for women that do suffer with it on a larger scale, it can have a significant impact on their ability to want to carry on with a corporate career, because something's got to give and they can't stop being a mum. So it's kind of, and even for people that aren't mums, it's still challenging to find that energy to get up every day and go when you're feeling a bit run down. And the thing is, this kind of perimenopausal stage, we spoke about it before. How long can it last, Tina?
It can last, 10 years. So it can last a long time. So after around the age of 40, your estrogen levels are naturally starting to decline. And, that could go on. Some women might not stop their periods and go into menopause until they're in their early 50s. So, and symptoms can come and go during that time. Interestingly, I've got a lot of friends who've got significant jobs, or who had significant jobs, who talk about, I was burnt out. I had to stop because I was burnt out. And now, because of this conversation that is happening, they're saying to me, oh my God, this is what was wrong with me. And, but I just thought why was I able to do this job for 20 years? And then suddenly I was no longer able to do this job. It's quite a big conversation. And then I've got another friend who has just been stabilised on HRT. And she said to me, I haven't slept since I had my youngest son, who's now 9, you know, and that's a long time not to sleep properly and to be doing a very responsible job, and, you know, try and do everything else that goes with having that job and having small children. So, you know, this idea of burnout, I think, is where the conversation now is helping educate that it's not burnout, it's stages of menopause.
And I think as well, it's you know, allowing a platform for men to be, one, aware, and actually, two, more empathetic, because they don't have the same hormonal challenges in that way that go on a monthly basis, let alone at a much bigger stage of life. And so you can't sometimes walk in another man or woman's shoes, because you have to have some form of anchoring to empathise. And if you don't have that, it's very difficult to do so, which is why I think the creation of the vest has been, you know, really interesting to see.
Yeah, we haven't come up with the idea of creating something for men, for women to understand that need to buy motorbikes in the middle. So when we do, we'll let you know.
Well, I'm still looking. I really love the contraction simulator as well. So there's so many. We've got to find some more of those. Maybe we'll do that one next.
Maybe we will.
Where does it go?
On your stomach. I don't know where you thought it went, but
That's what I asked. I'm worried. What are you going to do to us next?
I think there's definitely a big shift going on. I mean, I've got a friend, she's 40 actually. I think I messaged you about this. And her family have got a history of becoming perimenopausal at a younger age. So she's already in a fortunate position where she's more aware of her own family medical history. And so has kind of started over the last 18 months making a list. And for her, it's really hit a peak where there are days where she just comes in and is crying, going, I don't want to feel like this anymore. I don't feel like myself. I don't have that control. And I think it's about knowing where to go, having the resources available, having multiple people speak about it. Like with Davina the other day, as I mentioned, she put out on her Menopause Monday post about, we all know about HRT, but I have lots of people that can't take HRT. And actually, what do you do in those situations?
Yeah.
Where can you go? What is right? What is wrong? And I think with Femoral, that was one of the things for me that was really exciting, was, again, it's going back to that power of choice.
Yeah. And one of the things we really push against, and it's interesting, we talk to you guys about this in terms of branding. And one of the things that, you know, I have very strong views on branding and what, you know, relates to it and what doesn't. And people will often come to us and say, and they'll use the word sexy. Oh, one ad that somebody showed us was, oh, I just want to feel sexy again. And my point was, what if you never felt sexy? Do you know what I mean? That you can't make that assumption. So what I hear from the women I know is, I just want to be the person I was. You know, I once woke up in the morning and looked in the mirror and did not recognise the person I was or had become, and I want that person back. And so what you're helping, you know, whether it's HRT, whether it's, you know, a supplement like Femoral, whatever it is, you are, or other choices, holistic choices, what you're trying to do is help women get back what they were, so they feel that kind of sense of identity with the woman they've lived for 40 odd years.
And I think there are multiple stages in life where you can feel as a female you lose that identity. I know when when I had my little boy, who I absolutely adore, even though I almost killed him on my week off last week because it's summer holidays.
Yeah.
Yeesh.
That's part of the course.
We had a little giggle about that one. I lost my sense of identity when I had my little boy, because there's this demand, this thing that you haven't had to experience before in a very extreme way, that kind of takes over your day-to-day life as you knew it. And actually, if you think about it, kind of menopausal, perimenopause, whatever, it's the same thing. It's something you've not necessarily experienced before. Therefore, you don't have anything to anchor against. It's like our pain thresholds. You know, when I got my first tattoo, I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God, I'm going to fall off my chair. It's going to be agonising. And then because I hadn't experienced that pain before. And then once I did it, I was like, I'll do the next one. It's easy peasy. So it's kind of finding something to measure it against. And I think you don't have that. It's a challenge, I think, to get your head around it and therefore explain it to people when you're going through it.
Yeah. And I think that's true, isn't it? I you know, my son is 15, so everything I do is embarrassing to him. And I will often say to him, oh, look at me on Radio 4, and he's like, oh, just be quiet. And then you know, when I was on Radio 4 and he texted me in the middle of the day. I mean, obviously he shouldn't have had his phone at school. I don't know why they're allowed to do that. But texted me in the middle of the day going, yeah, can you just send me that that bit of Radio 4 that you're on? And so he did actually want to show it to get his mates to listen to it. And my friend, who was his business teacher, told me, oh yeah, Max shared, you know, in business about you doing this. So it is quite interesting, you know, what to have, and that's important. It's important that those boys feel that they're able to say that stuff, because one day they will be with a woman who is menopausal, hopefully.
Absolutely. Annoyingly, I had a really good question for you, Chris, and it's just completely left my head, which is really going to get on my nerves now.
It's quite a relief for me, though.
Speaking of relief, you're right there, Dean. You've gone really quiet.
No, I'm fine. Honestly, I was just thinking about this, about everything we said. I was just thinking about the concept of we're breaking down all these taboos at the moment. Again, obviously neurodiversity at the moment. You know, there's a lot of things going on in the world at the moment in terms of people waking up to. Again, you call it woke, but I don't think it's. I think people are. Yeah, there's a night. There are people who are literally saying we need to think about other people and how. And I was just thinking, you know, this is again. This just feels like an extension of that. It's because we're just exploring things that have not been explored properly before. I mean, and some more important than others, but they're all important to the people that it's going through, right?
But I think we're starting to hold. Whether that be at government level, whatever, we're holding people accountable to actually not just talking about it, but trying to put things in place to follow through. That pressure is being applied. That voice is getting louder. That's why I remember the question now, Chris. When the consumer research was being done with Theramex, one of the things that I felt it when you kind of relayed it back that made you really sad was actually one of the things that the women said they felt a lot of the time. Can you talk about that experience?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we have to be a little bit careful in the sense that, you know, we know that women have a spectrum of different experiences from you know, sail through the menopause, one extreme, and suffering a lot at the other. However, in the qualitative research, which I kind of sat in on, I thought it was really, the word sad came up a lot. So, you know, when women were just talking freely and asked about how they felt in general, it was a recurrent theme, which I thought was really, you know, really sad. And it was one of the drivers that we'd already had in terms of creating the mission and a sense of purpose for the brand Femerel was, you know, you can't just stop people feeling sad, but there's probably something you can do. And I always felt that the issue was that, you know, the signs that people have, that what they experience, are kind of bad enough. We're experiencing a little bit of what it can be like now. And to some extent, medication can help, but it can't completely eliminate that, okay? However, it just seemed unnecessary to me that society makes it worse. Okay, we've been talking about the workplace. We've been talking about women driven out of their roles because partly because of an intolerant workplace. So, you know, this burnt out thing that Tina was referring to is interesting to me because in a sense they were, but they didn't need to be if there'd been an environment that was much more amenable, much more empathetic, etc. to the situation. Yeah. So this is why I felt that this is actually a banner under which Femerel could fight, as it were, as a brand, which was that if we can normalize it, you know, have an impact on society, society's more accepting, then you remove some of the pain, the emotional and the the pain that's not physical, because that's, you know, that can be alleviated to some extent, but society can help with all the rest of it, and that a brand could maybe play a role in doing that.
Absolutely. Positivity all the way.
And this idea of holding people accountable, I think, is really important. So one of the things that, you know, when we had the discussions in Parliament with male MPs wearing the vest, which was interesting, and it was very partisan. There was people there from the Tories, Labour, Liberal Democrats, SNP as well. And they were all there, and they all came really because of Carolyn Harris and, you know, the respect they have for her. But it was very interesting, really, to talk to them about their experiences. And I think what we have to be really confident about is that we are going to be the generation that makes people accountable to make a difference to this. So we are going to take the fight further. We are going to make sure that GPs do something about it, and that they don't, and that they are educated, and that they are incentivized. We are going to make sure that there is a national formulary for HRT, and that all women, wherever they are, can get the same level of care and medicine. We are going to make those things happen, and we are going to make people accountable for 51% of the population, because 51% of the population are women. And, this area, this demographic of women is getting bigger in terms of thousands and thousands and millions of women in this age group. It's the fastest growing age group. So we have to be the generation that make people accountable, because we're accountable for it ourselves.
Oh, she's such a badass, isn't she? I love it. Yes, this is amazing. So I love you, Tina. Spot on. You're absolutely spot on.
Thank you.
So we're coming to the end of the podcast, but I think there's two things that I want to just talk about quickly. So what is World Menopause Day in 2022? So it is on the 18th of October, World Menopause Day around the world. It's a worldwide awareness call for women who face health issues. I'm going to say women and men.
Yeah.
Who face issues when approaching, during and beyond the menopause. And I think there's a really great opportunity for brands to, not just brands, but everybody to get involved in that discussion. So I'm going to leave it with our final question that we have of the day. The vest is back on. Dean is still there. He's happy. I think we should put Chris back in it. Darren would have been great to see in the vest. What's the one piece, from all three of you separately, and we'll start, I think, with you, Chris, and end with Tina. What can brands, marketeers, and companies do, based on what we've spoke about today, to make a difference in this area?
Well, everything starts with understanding, doesn't it, really? So I think, pay attention to this subject. Don't ignore it. Make sure you understand first what's going on. And then in health and beauty in particular, consider what you can do to encourage the normalization and dialogue. I'm sure many health and beauty brands can.
Dean?
Yeah, just reflecting on your point there, you talked about World Menopause Day, and you said women and men. I think if we can all understand, then it's going to be easier. Because again, I think, some companies, there are more men, more women, but there's ultimately going to be men and women involved in some of the, especially the business environment, involved in working on projects and things, and therefore they need to understand, like with all of the challenges that we face, that what challenges people are facing at what time. So it's about opening up the debate and including men in it, so that I don't get that weird feeling when people talk about subjects that are traditionally haven't been spoken about.
I think it starts with culture, though, doesn't it? Like you were saying as well, it's that people first, policy second.
Yep.
Absolutely. I think, I just echo what my colleagues have said here. One of the things I love about working with Paul is that you walk the walk, and you don't just come and say, oh, we understand, about menopause, and we've seen the statistics, and we've seen the Davina program, so we know everything there is about it, but you seek to understand. And, I think you can't underestimate that, because that's really important for this group of women. Don't make assumptions about us from a brand point of view, and don't underestimate us, because we are going to change how women's healthcare is viewed in this country, and we've already made significant inroads to that, but there's a huge amount to do. So not making assumptions and actually seeking to understand is really, really important, I think.
Absolutely. And if you have any more questions, please do get in touch with us, and we can definitely put you in touch with our menopause mogul to my right. Thank you so much
You're very
today,
welcome. You're
guys.
very
And
welcome.
thank you for being good sports, Chris and Dean, for sweating it out in the conversation.
Hot now, definitely hot.
hot now. He's sitting there thinking,
Not in a good
smug,
way.
oh, it's fine. And we realise that the cables are hanging on the floor. So.
I know.
He's like British Rail,
Yeah.
the wrong kind of leaves. This is the wrong kind of heat.
I know,
I
exactly.
We need to go cold for Dean next
Sun,
time.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for listening, guys. Remember, it is World Menopause Awareness Day on the 18th of October. So if you have any questions around what Theramex or Femoral are doing, please do get in touch. Or if you like what you hear and you want to be involved in one of Paul's Future of Beauty Unfiltered podcasts, please get in touch at podcast@menopause thepullagency.co.uk. Take care.